the highly anticipated series adaptation to the famous 2013 video game has finally come, and now a wave of hype and fascination has come over old and new fans of The Last of Us. After all, with the video game acclaimed as groundbreaking, people just can't wait to immerse themselves into the post-apocalyptic world story. Let's take a look at the behind-the-scenes details that happened on The Last of Us. The Last of Us. Based on a groundbreaking action-adventure game that revolved around a smuggler tasked with escorting a young teenage girl in a post-apocalyptic United States, The Last of Us video game was released in 2013 and received critical acclaim and praise due to its high-quality narrative, gameplay, visuals, and characters. It became one of the best-selling video games of all time, selling 1.3 million units within its first week. Now, 10 years after the video game's release, the epic action drama has a TV adaptation on HBO, with the series set 20 years after the cordyceps fungal infection had spread, sparking a global pandemic that reshaped the world as we know it. This infection causes its victims to transform into cannibalistic and highly violent creatures, much like zombies. The show was filmed in Alberta, Canada from July 2021 to June 2022 and became the largest television production in Canadian history. This is the first series on HBO that is based on a video game, with its first season of 9 episodes set to cover events of the first game. Sources suggest that the show has a whopping budget of $10 to $15 million per episode, with some even claiming that the series' budget exceeds that of the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones. Now that the show has been released and many new fans have been introduced to The Last of Us, many want to find out more about the enigmatic show. So let's go through some of the data passed along the metabolic network to know more. Some details to be revealed may contain spoilers for the show's earlier episodes, so be warned. The groundbreaking show. Aside from a pretty huge overall budget, The Last of Us series is a joint production between HBO and original game key players, creators, and producers, Sony Pictures Television, PlayStation Productions, Naughty Dog, The Mighty Mint, and Word Games. The first season of the show is written by Neil Druckmann, who wrote and co-directed the original game alongside showrunner Craig Mazin, who was also behind the intense series Chernobyl. This transition into live action has already been called the best adaptation of any video game property, making this a pretty solid view of things to come for the Last of Us franchise. Considering that the major video game has 2 parts, we already know that the game and the series has wide horizons ahead. The show is filled with stunning post-apocalyptic visuals depicting society's eventual downfall in a rather realistic way, with remaining human survivors existing within quarantine zones while trying to survive amidst mushroom-looking zombies. The Last of Us offers a different perspective within the zombie apocalypse genre, with fungus called cordyceps being the reason for the zombie outbreak instead of the more conventional virus or bacteria. Cordyceps are in fact real and exist in our world. This type of fungus can be found in hot and humid places, such as jungles, but only affects small insects. Much like the depiction in the show, this parasitic fungus has the ability to somehow control the insect's mind, so that when a spore gets an insect infected, it climbs to a high point so that when it dies, the fungus grows out of the dead bug to spread more spores around its environment. While currently, these cordyceps don't affect humans, the show is providing us an alternate view of reality should these fungus ever mutate. In The Last of Us show, this outbreak devours humanity, when in 2003, the same cordyceps fungal infection sparked a global pandemic. 20 years later, people live within quarantine zones managed by an authoritarian federal disaster response agency, or FEDRA. The showrunners did mention that a few alterations was needed so that the series won't feel like a simple carbon copy of the game. Craig Mazin said during an interview, "When you're adapting something like a video game, changes have to be done smartly. We're telling more. There's so much in between. It is going to be beautiful, terrifying, but ultimately, it's enlightening. Fans of the game surely won't mind a change and a twist here and there, because with a running time of 85 minutes for its first episode, there's going to be plenty of stories within the game to tell." Powercast. While the game surely includes plenty of characters full of depth and intensity, with incredible well-written stories, The Last of Us revolves around 2 characters. Primarily Joel, the smuggler who falls into the task of safely transporting probably humanity's most important asset against the outbreak, Ellie, a teenage girl who is somehow immune to it all. The game itself is much like a coming-of-age story for Ellie, played by the indomitable Bella Ramsey, as she becomes a survivor herself. The actress is known for her breakthrough role as the strong Lyanna Mormont, who faced giants despite her young age. In casting an actress for Ellie, showrunners had to watch over 100 auditions before finding Bella, who exuded the natural qualities of strength with a touch of viciousness. as well as the quirkiness of a 14-year-old needed for the role. On the other hand, when Pedro Pascal, who was sent the script for the role, he agreed to play the part within the day. Joel's character is based on Llewellyn Moss from the infamous film No Country for Old Men, with both characters known to be stoic with lock-up emotions. Aside from all the action that Joel has to face in order to survive, there's almost moments of levity and charisma that somehow Pedro Pascal thrives in. He's already pretty established as a favorite character actor, especially with his already endeared roles as The Mandalorian and Oberyn Martell in Game of Thrones. Much like in the game's experience, the relationship between Joel and Ellie is central to the show's plot, and it will be exciting to witness both of them opening up to each other. This live-action adaptation is bringing to life an important part of the game, where players are asked to interact with Ellie, a completely AI companion. The adaptation also offers viewers a more plot-developed story, providing an opportunity to expand on characters' backstories, such as Marlene and Ellie's relationship. This is because the plot isn't limited to a first-person POV. We get to see and understand much more of who these people are, and what motivates them. These characters become more than non-playable characters within a game that you have to interact with. The show provides a much deeper dive into the lore of The Last of Us, allowing us to connect more with its characters as well. Realistic sets and FX. The Last of Us games are known for its breathtaking visuals and effects, which are also passed on seamlessly into the show. Huge apocalyptic sets were created to match the lushness of the game while making it more realistic. Using art books from the original game as a jumping point, producers made practical sets and effects, even for short scenes of the show. Some sets were only used even once, such as the interior of the Capitol building, which was built on a soundstage from scratch. An enormous amount of time and resources were also spent to build out the quarantine zone for one particular episode. To keep the aesthetics of the game, the show's art team were given the direction to find beauty in fungus. They were able to capture this by highlighting how fungus grows and spreads, with its lush colors and interesting patterns. Creating the gory and mushroom-infected zombies was also a challenge they had to face, and to make them look as close to the source material as possible, which were sculpted and designed digitally. They hired award-winning prosthetics artists from Game of Thrones. The prosthetics and makeup team of the show provided actors a way to keep their freedom of movement, allowing certain moves to stand out and depict a puppet being controlled by the parasite. There was even a movement boot camp to train extras on how to move like they were infected. There are also certain changes into the show that provided a bit more scientific backing, such as the transferring of tendrils from one host to another. These are among the things of the show that has everyone excited for what's to come, especially since conversations have already begun about the show's Season 2 approval. And with quite an incredible response from the audience so far, we can't wait to see how this season unfurls. So what do you think about behind-the-scenes details that happened on The Last of Us?